The Brothers Wisp. The Brothers Wisp, Brothers Wisp. The Brothers Wisp. The Brothers.
You're now listening to Greg. It's the Brothers Wisp. Let's take a
Hey
ride
everybody,
through space
this
on
is the Brothers
mothership.
Wisp number
While you're
96. I am Greg Soul, and I'm coming to you from Texas. Not much variety here. It's been hot and moist, and that's about it. I think that's all I got to talk about. We've got Mikey from Chicagoland. Say hi, Mikey.
Hey, how's it going?
Below us, we've got Nick from almost Chicagoland.
Almost. Hi, everybody.
And then we've got Thomas, who is exceptionally far from Chicagoland.
Hello, everyone.
Thomas from Slovakia. It always makes me feel so international. I've got a friend who's from Slovakia. I've got this friend who's Slovakian. You know, I try and work it into average conversations. Anyway, let's talk about our sponsor. It's still Pennytone. It's still Dave. It is a VoIP solution provider. So basically, in essence, you need VoIP phones for your office. You go to Dave. He's the easy button. He does the hunt groups. He does the call management, all of the on-hold music, all of the fun things about running a VoIP system. He takes care of all of the difficult bits there. All you have to do is throw out phones and pick them up when they ring. It's pennytone.com. I think he's also got a phone number listed on his site, and he apparently loves it when strangers call him and say hello, so be sure to reach out. Let's see, new patron. We have a new patron this week, and when we say patron, that's patreon.com/TheBrothersWISP. You jump in there, you become a patron like Thomas Stevens, and you get access to our patron-only Slack, where all of the fun things happen, the good conversation, everybody answers my questions, and it makes me sound smart. Let's see. Jumping right in, this one I'm not familiar with, but Thomas was kind enough to fill out most of our stuff this week. It is MikroTik CHR performance issues with AMD What's the EPYC? What's that?
It's Epyc. It's AMD Epyc. It's the server-side processor products from AMD based on the Zen architecture.
Excellent. Well, tell us what the CHR performance issues are all about.
Well, basically, yeah, it's just really weird and quite bad performance issues when CHR is running on Epyc-based servers. And so far, basically, Intel with their Xeon line, right, has had pretty much a monopoly on the server processor chip market for the last 10 years or so. Well, the AMD Epyc CPUs are finally starting to show up in server product. So this is the Zen architecture, basically the architecture that the desktop Ryzen processors are based on. Epyc is the server side of those processors. And if you saw, for example, a few months ago there was a new Ryzen processor release, and they are pretty much on par or even beating Intel in performance numbers while being 2 to 3 to 5 times cheaper than Intel on the desktop side. So you can imagine how that basically translates to the server side. But since AMD has had so little presence in the server chip market the last 10 years, it turns out there are still some optimization issues, specifically with MikroTik using quite old kernels. So a lot of the performance fixes for the Epyc processors are inside of the kernel, which MikroTik of course doesn't have. So all in all, this translates to really bad performance with CHR running on Epyc architectures, up to the point where you get like 1/4 or even 1/5 of the throughput basically on Epyc processors as compared to Xeons. And MikroTik has supposedly been looking and trying to fix it, and there have been emails back and forth, and so far there is no solution. So just watch out if you are running Epyc chips and you want to use CHR. Yeah, chances are you won't be happy with the results.
So is this CHR on bare metal? Is that what we're talking about? Or like through a hypervisor?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
That's interesting. I figured the hypervisor would kind of mask those issues, but it doesn't. Huh?
Well, still, right? The instructions going to the virtualized CPU go back to the hardware CPU. So, at the end, it's still the hardware CPU executing instructions, which the virtualized operating system asks for. So.
Gotcha. So this is a known issue, and they're working on it.
Supposedly working on it. We'll see if they even can do anything about it at this point without massively backporting kernel patches and other things, which probably will be too much of an ask, especially since the chip market for Epyc is still quite small, or the share of the market for Epyc is still quite small.
Gotcha. Did you personally run into this, or do you have a customer?
No. This is not me. I have I wouldn't say a customer, but I have a friend who is running into these issues.
How fun and interesting. All right. So lately, Thomas, you have been the security guy. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Have you always been the security guy, and you're just now kind of showing this side of yourself, or what?
No, I have always been very much into security, but lately I've upped my game by setting up custom notifications on like keywords and basically, it's just Google notifications based on certain things, and it's really helped me to basically catch up to pretty much anything that happens in security land right now. I get notified instead of having to go look for it, which is a very big difference, and it's super important to be proactive on these things, and I've just been sharing it into the Slack.
Gotcha. So step one, you said, well, not step one, but I guess security issue 1, 30 plus Cisco unauthenticated RCEs for various Cisco equipment. I remember when you posted that. Obviously, I run a lot of Cisco kit at the data center, so one, it's not obvious, but I do. And so I kind of freaked out, and I looked at it, and it doesn't appear very many platforms are really... It's a lot of NXOS stuff, which is going to be their Nexus line. I don't know a lot of people that have their Nexus kit externally available, right? Most of it's internal only.
For these ones, it was like the small business switches, the 300, 500, 200 small business series. Then there was some wireless controller vulnerabilities, and then NXOS.
Yeah, integrated management controller and stuff. Yeah.
But it's still like 30 plus, products being affected by high or critical severity unauthenticated remote code execution exploits. So you should probably, or anyone should probably look at this list and make sure that if you are running any of these devices, you update.
I mean, some of it's pretty big, like iOS and iOS-XE. Application recognition, DOS, you've got an iOS and iOS-XE, HSRP, hot standby router protocol, information leak vulnerability, right? So I know a lot of folks that are running HSRP on iOS and XE.
Yeah, it's a bunch of really, as I said, either high severity or critical severity things, so patching is really required.
Yeah, for sure. And then another one, an iOS-XE critical, 10 out of 10. Authorization vulnerability. Cisco's really having a bad week, huh?
Yeah, Cisco is having a really bad 2 weeks for the last 2 weeks. So this one is kind of ridiculous because it's for iOS-XE and it's 10 out of 10 severity rating, which I don't even remember the last time I saw a 10 out of 10. So this one basically for iOS-XE API, there is an exploit which completely ignores any authentication. So if you see an iOS-XE API, the device is yours.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And XE, what runs XE code? That's like some of their smaller ASRs, like the 1000 ones and stuff, right?
Yeah, quite a bit of the ASR, the VX stuff, all the virtualized stuff, right? It's basically the iOS under Linux, right? So a bunch of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so the ASR is going to be... I know a lot of kind of mid-size enterprise that uses them for their border routers, which means it's got a public IP on it. So theoretically, that's kind of the sweet spot for this vulnerability, I guess.
Yeah, it's especially dangerous with the recent vulnerabilities inside of the security engine. The FPGA chip, which was actually a hardware vulnerability inside of the FPGA chip for bypassing the secure domain of Cisco routers and getting into the underlying Linux. So it's like if you find one of these vulnerabilities, you can really easily bootstrap it into bypassing the security domain controller, and then basically you have a vulnerability which won't go away even after reboots, because in the recent vulnerability, which I believe we have covered about a couple of months ago or 3 months ago, basically allowed you to hide malware inside of the FPGA processor registers. So you are at that point literally exploiting the hardware security chip itself. So it's like you can chain these vulnerabilities. That is why they are so dangerous, because these bigger boxes, if you, for example, you actually need a physical security domain chip replacement for the FPGA chips, right? If you don't do the physical chip replacement, and one of these vulnerabilities is used to bootstrap another vulnerability that gets all the way into that, you can basically throw away the box.
Gotcha. Somebody holds the door open and lets the bad guys in. I get it. That's not good. All right, let's switch from Cisco over to Kubernetes, DOS vulnerabilities.
Yeah, so
First, start by what is Kubernetes, because I think it's going to be somewhat unfamiliar to a lot of guys listening to this.
So Kubernetes is basically like to describe it simply, it's like a cluster controller for Docker. So that's the simplest description. It's basically like, for example, like vCenter for your ESXi, right? And that's, as I said, I'm very simplifying here, trying to make it simpler for people to understand. But yeah, it's basically a cluster management suite.
Okay. And the DOS vulnerabilities?
So yeah, there's a DOS, denial of service vulnerability for Kubernetes, which basically allows you to completely DOS a Kubernetes cluster, which, as you can imagine, is not optimal.
Who didn't Google develop Kubernetes? Isn't that where that came from?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So one would assume they probably use that in spades, right?
Oh yeah, but their control plane will most likely be protected well enough, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an attack against the control plane to DOS the control plane.
Gotcha. So anybody running Kubernetes, watch out. All right. Another one that kind of gave me a bit of a scare was the web, and for multiple reasons, was the Webmin unauthenticated RCE vulnerability. And you here in the notes put supply chain attack, and it's not just a vulnerability, but when you say supply chain attack, that means it came, the call came from the inside, right?
Oh yeah, this one is kind of scary. So
yeah, that one's tripping out.
I never ever ran Webmin, and I don't like Webmin as a concept, but this is just my personal opinion, and this is due to how I do things, and due to what my philosophy on doing things is. So this one is particularly scary because the exploit was executed inside of the build chain of the Webmin architecture. So inside of the CI/CD continuous integration, continuous development platform for Webmin. So the attackers actually got into the build server of the Webmin project and then introduced the vulnerability in the build stage, which means it was not detected for more than half a year, because the vulnerability wasn't in the source code, it was inside of the build chain. So what happened is that the attackers introduced a unauthenticated remote code execution, and what's even worse, the code would be executed as root, because Webmin runs as root, because that's the point of Webmin, right? To be able to manage your servers, which means it will be running as root. So this means that if an attacker found a accessible Webmin interface, he now completely owned the entire server. And so what happens is you can check, I'm sure we will include the link, there is a list of infected versions that were published publicly. So only builds uploaded to SourceForge were were infected by the RCE, but still, if you are running Webmin, because you usually don't validate where your package comes in, right? And you usually don't even know where your package has come in. So it's super scary because you don't even know if you were affected by this or not, because if you don't tightly control where your packages come from, and even if they come from some, apt or yum repositories, do you know how those packages got into those repositories? It's very hard to even know if you were affected by this or not. So it's a super scary situation.
Yeah. Well, I know I use Webmin a pretty decent bit. For us, the whole premise is, right, Webmin is you throw this on your Linux machine, it installs very easily pretty much on any flavor you have, and then you've got a web-based GUI where you can go in there, you can configure anything from your bind DNS server to your Apache server to, if you're running DHCP, you can do system configuration changes. It makes it super easy. So even like our very non-technical guys sitting in the network operations center can go in there and make changes, or at least look at things, right? It kind of sort of gives the easy button to non-technical users, especially guys that aren't Linux guys or really aren't command line guys. So I think really for this to be problematic for you, you had to have this on the public internet. And none of our infrastructure, as far as administration goes, is available on the public internet, so we're pretty safe there. But it does seem kind of scary, right? Like I think I remember hearing some guys talk about what happens if one of the core components that like all these customer management systems or whatever utilize, what if somebody just slipped a piece of code into one of those and then everybody else starts building those into their packages, and then you could theoretically, I guess the domino effect, make a whole lot of various systems vulnerable via that sort of thing. Because like you were saying, not everybody authenticates where their packages are coming from, right? So it's kind of a scary concept. You could get in there and do that sort of thing.
Oh, it's not even about being exposed to the internet. Like most, I don't want to say most, but a large part of infrastructure attacks today comes from inside of the network. Right? It's always the administrator, the end user is always the most vulnerable part of any system.
Right.
So if somebody exploits any workstation inside of your network, we've been covering so many network exploits and ways to get inside of the network, and then you have so many different vulnerabilities with even like the Spectre attacks and the side channel attacks on the processor level through various 0 days in from your operating system to your software to anything, An attacker today can reasonably easily get inside of the network. And usually you don't protect those management interfaces like Webmin from inside of your network, right? You have of course you don't expose your management to your entire local network, right? But we are talking about here that somebody exploits one of the many administrator computers you have in your network. And then they can, bootstrap into your servers. If they find there is a vulnerable version of Webmin, they instantly have control over your servers. So it's quite scary.
Yeah. What did somebody say? The only way to protect your computer is to unplug it from the network, unplug it from the wall.
I wouldn't go that far, right? There is reasonable ways to protect yourself on various levels. And this is one of the things, or one of the reasons why I don't like Webmin, because I don't think a web interface, which let's be realistic, in 90% of cases will be HTTP, not HTTPS, because nobody wants to deal with self-signed certificates and other things. So realistically, in 90% of use cases, it will be HTTP. I don't think that's the right way to manage your servers, but again, that's just my opinion.
Gotcha. And it's a good thing I don't give a crap about your opinion, Thomas.
Right.
I'm going to rub my Webmin if I want to. No.
You go ahead.
There's always one more thing you could do, right? Like your network for the management interfaces, you could air gap them, right? So that you have to go through a jump station. So, but then, theoretically, if that jump station becomes vulnerable, then somebody can get it. So it's the same thing we look at kind of in the data center industry. There's always one more thing you can do to add redundancy, but at some point you get diminishing returns from those things, right? So I guess it just depends on your infrastructure and how risk averse you are around that stuff.
It's a very complicated discussion, of course. It's not a simple black and white situation. Like for me, you say, a Webmin is a nice way to give non-technical user access to your servers. Well, I would say non-technical users shouldn't have access to your servers in the first place, right? They are non-technical users. Like how hard is it to fish non-technical users or right. to social engineer non-technical users? So why do they have access to your servers? But again, it's not as simple as that, right? There are valid use cases and valid needs where you need to do that. So,
for sure.
It's.
I use Webmin in a bunch of servers because it's a hell of a lot easier.
Oh, it's fast and efficient, especially. Well, I mean, what I really like about it too. Another thing I like about Webmin, not only is it easy to get on there, but it's the exact same interface no matter what the underlying system is. So if you're using Ubuntu or CentOS or anything, everything's in the exact same spot, right?
So why are you using distributions which you don't know and understand?
Oh no, I just mean like if I'm doing it on my infrastructure that I do know and love, and then I've got a friend of mine that happens to run a completely different infrastructure over here, theoretically I could still help them over, and well, you say that. I mean, sometimes we have a vendor that will say, this piece of software is only covered if you install it on this underlying system, right? So then you're vendor locked to whatever that platform happens to be, and just but there's always use cases. Right?
Yeah, I know there is always use cases, but right, if you want to talk about doing things properly and having your infrastructure in proper state, then that's a very different to let's do it somehow and sure, we need another distribution that won't ever be upgraded or supported by anybody internally. Sure, let's just throw it up there.
Well, also, you got to keep in mind that a lot of folks work for a company, and one of the main constraints they have is employees. That's like one of the one things you can't get. They'll never give you money, and they'll never give you employees. So it's sometimes that's just another constraint.
I can't find employees.
That's what I was just about to ask how Mike's search was going, because you didn't look like you're having too much luck so far, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, actually, so we tried with salespeople the other day because that was where we had the most response. 8 interviews scheduled on Thursday, 0 showed up.
Oh, that sucks.
Wow.
So
Millennials,
it's
right?
hard to get people to show up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you want them to actually work out in the middle of nowhere? Or are these guys working remote? Or, I mean, I'm just curious. Like, I wonder how hard it is to hire folks these days, remote versus actually in an office, 8 to 5.
The sales guy would be mobile, but like for the tech, for the network server guy, it's like, in the general area, but work at home is fine as long as you get your shit done.
Yeah, that's hard. I haven't met too many people in their 20s. I mean, I've met a handful that actually are self-starters enough to where they can, keep themselves on task and actually work from home without getting distracted. I know. Well, I mean, I'm talking to 2 of them. Nick is definitely that guy, and Thomas is definitely that guy. But you guys are weirdos, so you're not representative of the
they're weird. I
don't as a whole, right? Most people aren't able to kind of control themselves in those environments. I think when I was like 24, I probably wasn't ready to work remote. I'm very much a different person now, and I can't do anything but work nowadays. I never enjoy myself if I'm not working. I have this whole guilt thing associated with work. If I'm not working, I feel guilty. So it's a good way to be.
I got some stuff you can work on if you want.
No, it's okay. I got plenty of my own crap piling up. Let's keep trucking. So, Thomas, while we got you lathered up and all worked up, let's talk about the Unimus 1.10.4 release.
Yeah, we released another release to the 110 code branch this week, and was it this week? Yes, it was this week.
Feels like this week.
And yeah, it's just a small feature release and bug/issue fix release. Definitely recommend everybody to updating to it ASAP. There should be zero risk. So far we have had 0 complaints or bugs filed against the release. So it's just another really nice small, step-by-step release.
What's the average update? I mean, what does the update process look like? How do I do an update? If you had to tell me in 20 seconds, what's that like?
Literally one line of shell.
All right. So you're basically saying it's like the Webmin of updates. It's very easy to use.
No, it's not the Webmin interface.
Good for non-technical people to make the updates. No, I did our Unimus install on the last update. I got my number 2 guy to do it, and it took him all of 5 minutes. It was super simple.
Yeah, like one of our main design principles is simplicity. There should never be like a 10-page upgrade/migration guide or stuff like that. It should just work, right? It's what people pay for to make it work. So why fight with software? Software should be there to help you, not for you to fight with.
Yeah.
So we make it do it like that, and
so
then it's one line
when are you
of
gonna
shell.
put a button in Unimus that says upgrade, and I could just click it?
Oh, I could talk for a long time why that is probably never going to happen, honestly.
You suck. All right then, fine. I'll do the 5-minute thing instead of the 5-second thing. Let's see.
Security.
Hey, I would tell you, just automate it with your Puppet or whatever automation solution you do. Like all of our Unimus deploys literally update themselves. We push out the new release and everything just updates itself.
Oh man, maybe that would be a good use case for my new Ansible install. I'll give it a try.
You have to actually. I'm working on fleshing out a somewhat of a job post, RFP, whatever, for someone that does automation stuff for the IX. Because we got so many stuff that I'm not doing because I don't have time, and it's like if I could just run a command in Ansible that just deploys this platform.
Is most of it kind of tedious, repeatable tasks?
Yeah, and doing an upgrade, but then doing it across, because each town is isolated, so it's like I could see doing one town and then once it's fine, run the command on the other towns, but it's like that doesn't happen. We do one town, and it's like, well, fuck, I got another day of running commands on the next town. Because there's so many little things, and it's like just need to find someone that can pay them and just make this work, and then I can use my time more effectively than pounding on a keyboard all day.
Well, good luck to you, Mike. I'm not that guy. Anybody interested, hit up Mikey. He's desperate. Let's see. Moving on the list. I've been doing a little bit of fiber stuff lately. And one of them is I built this really gigantic fiber tester out of this old media converter that had both single mode and multi-mode in it. And I wanted to make another one, maybe a little bit more compact, a little bit more convenient, because that one ran off of AA batteries and 9-volt batteries, and it was always dead every time I needed it. So I ordered one of those super cheap $25 TP-Link media converters. And the good thing about it is it's got an SFP slot in it, which Mike would be stoked about. He loves the SFPs.
Good.
Right, the brilliant part about SFPs is you can swap them out. So I can have single mode, and then I can just pull that out, and I can put multi-mode. I can try virtually any optic type I want. And it's really just for testing fiber. So what I do is I take it, and I plug the fiber that needs to be tested in, and at the other end, I just loop it on itself. And if I get a green light, that's great, and it works. The good thing about that is it's actually going down one length and coming back the other, so if it works, that's basically double the distance that you would normally be trying to run your configuration through, your connection through. So it generally, I use that kind of in-building testing and stuff like that. If it works, I can say, well, it should work with an optic. It's also those TP-Link ones, they link up with Cisco kit. So if you've got a Cisco switch or router, it'll actually link up on that. It should link up on a MikroTik. The best part about it is they come with 9-volt wall warts, and I just took the power cord and cut it off and soldered on a USB cable, and I use it with my USB booster pack that I keep in my bag all the time. So It's very mobile. I don't even need an outlet to plug it into. I can just plug it into my USB booster pack. It powers it up. I test the fiber. I go about my way. It's really good for customer testing. They're turning up a new switch or something like that, and they're saying, oh, this cross connect's not working. Well, you can go to all the various points where you're cross connecting it, and you can test from there, and then move back a little bit, test from there, so you can actually find out where the issue happens to be very conveniently. Somebody was saying, well, we always just carry around a switch for that, and it's like, yeah, I just don't want to carry around a switch under my arm and my laptop and do all that crap all at the same time. I'd rather just have a small little device, and especially one that you can just throw together for $25. It's kind of a good option. Speaking of fiber and finding issues, we recently as probably a month and some change ago, had damage to one of our outdoor runs. And here's the trick. It goes on to university property. It was kind of this it was run before my time, but it was originally kind of this partnership between us and them, and they paid for half of it. So whenever you hit the university property, everything like becomes theirs. It's kind of like a sovereign little nation there. So it turned into a he said, she said thing. So we were trying to locate where the fiber damage was, and what our guys did is they opened up a splice can fairly near where they thought the damage was, and they OTDR'd a strand that went all the way through, and then they took that same strand and they bent it, and then OTDR'd it again. So they bent that strand just enough for it to actually show up as a little bit of reflection in the OTDR. Then they said, all right, compare that to the fiber that is broken, and we can see that it's they were like 1,225 feet from here, and that actually stuck it squarely on the university property right here at this X spot. Well, unfortunately, the university property was in a change freeze, so we couldn't do anything with them. A week later, they came out of the change freeze, so we had to send our guys back out there. They pinpointed it right in the last handhole on the university property, doing the same kind of shenanigans, the same trick. They just moved closer to on property. And so I found it really interesting, because in my head I was trying to figure out how are they going to locate this damage. That's a lot of damage, flex tape style. How are they going to locate it? And they actually did an extremely clever little trick. I would have never thought of opening a splice can and bending the fiber. Just enough to put that bit of reflection in there. So those fiber guys can be pretty clever, when they're not doing crazy things. I've seen them do some pretty nutty stuff. One fiber guy was telling me how he always gets his polishes to pass, like his fiber connectors back in the day, and they would do puck and polishes that he would take it and he would put it on his forehead and rub it a little bit and get a little grease off his skin and then test it. And somehow that just that always made it test. So I've always been somewhat wary of the fiber guys ever since then. But I guess most guys just take the connectors and fusion splice pigtails, so I'm sure they're fine. But that was my bit of interesting fiber stuff. So after that, did you guys read any of that Centurylink mystery outage FCC document? I thought it was
yeah, that was an interesting
one. Yeah, so I'm not sure when it was, because I didn't super pay attention to the dates on it. I think it was like December of 2018. Centurylink had an outage. I'm not sure how much of their network it actually covered, but it was a fairly large portion of it. But apparently 4 malformed packets got created on their management network, and it created a broadcast storm that took down, I don't know, like the East Coast or something.
To be more precise, it wasn't actually a broadcast storm as in a layer 2 broadcast storm. It was a layer 7 broadcast storm.
Interesting.
Wow. So there were 4 malformed management packets. So of course the article was light on details because they don't want to compromise their automation and network management system or internals of it. But there were 4 management packets that were generated. They basically didn't have an expiration timestamp, and they were set to deliver to all nodes. So if you can imagine, this is like a configuration change message of, change something on all devices, right? as just an example. But the point is, so they were generated with a valid signature, so they were valid, because obviously they do some crypto to validate the authenticity of their configuration management packets, right? Yeah, they were valid packets, they were signed, they had no expiration mark, and they were set to broadcast to all nodes and rebroadcast repeatedly. So from those 4 packets, you basically had that infinite positive feedback loop, but it was a layer 7 broadcast storm.
Interesting.
Because it was the application logic that kept retransmitting those packets, not the network itself.
Interesting. Yeah, that's pretty wacky. And I was, it made me start thinking about kind of the nature of the large carrier infrastructure and how it works. And I know I recently worked on a Sienna configuration, and it had one control, and they were advocating that everything on the management network was just one big flat layer 2 network across the entirety of the infrastructure. No matter how big it grew, they were basically saying just having one big layer 2 network. And I was thinking, wow, that does
was
make
it
you
like
fairly
a
vulnerable.
overlay or like an actual tunneled network?
It's using Sienna Kit, but it's doing it's basically just switching. It's doing
Okay, so it's not like a logical overlay, it's literally like a VLAN or tunnels between everything.
Yeah. It's just VLAN.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just layer 2 VLAN across all of the infrastructure. So that makes you very susceptible to lots of things. Lots of interesting things that could go wrong.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound like a good idea.
It seems interesting that they would advocate that kind of configuration.
But that bad idea is very widespread in the telco carrier world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was the design from Sienna themselves.
Yet I don't know what platform Frontier was using, but like a year and a half ago, provisioning was there was a hold put on provisioning any new circuits for about 2 weeks while they figured out why their management network was inaccessible due to a broadcast storm.
That sucks.
I'm like, what? How does this work? So apparently they sold no circuits didn't turn up any circuits for 2 weeks because they didn't know how to stop this broadcast storm.
Yeah, I've had carrier RFOs, like reason for outages, come back as we ended up sending techs out to every one of our points of presence and rebooting equipment to like stop storms. So it's pretty wacky how that stuff happens. But I mean, I guess they'll run fine for 3 years and then they'll have one bad week, and I guess that's not enough to fix everything. So I think part of it too is probably down to acquisitions, because a lot of these guys acquire networks so frequently that they almost abandon them in place and just kind of let them run, and they never seem to really do upgrades. I think they have plans to overhaul the infrastructure at some point, so they're like, well, we're not going to spend a lot of time and energy on this because we're planning on ripping and replacing at some point in the future. So maybe, at least I've seen that a couple of times, and then those projects just keep getting pushed further and further back, and then they run into problems.
Yeah, I was gonna say that lots of times it will just be legacy issues. Yeah, you buy a network, or you have some really old leg of your network that it's just legacy architecture, legacy configurations. But it's not easy to migrate networks which are running live data.
Yeah, especially when there's millions of dollars tied up into it. So, and you probably have contractual obligations, not to touch any of that stuff. And then I know certain times of year, certain industries go into change freezes, and they really don't want you to touch anything.
Not just that, it goes into compliance, right? Many times you cannot touch the existing configuration because you have compliance, and recertifying or recomplying everything, it's just you can imagine how much of a hurdle that is, especially if, only a part of the network might be serving government or some even army services or something that's super sensitive and requires compliance. Like, you literally cannot touch that.
Yeah. That kind of makes me think of, I was talking to JJ one time about airplane design and how airplane designs from like the 70s, they're still making them today. And I was thinking, why haven't they? I mean, we have all this new technology, these new techniques. Why do they still do that? And his answer was they basically, on an airplane chassis, a frame, he said they've basically had every lawsuit that could possibly be had against that airframe. So they know that it's like going to pass muster. And if they reinvent the wheel, then they open themselves up to legal obligation to be sued all over again because of this design, like this major design change or whatever. So I was thinking that's, you're so afraid of being sued that you're just locked into, some kind of ancient design or whatever. I think it was interesting. All right, let's move on to some less bummer stuff. I finally played with Capsman. Nick
Yay.
talked about it, and so I finally got in there and played with it enough, and it took a minute. I don't know, the documentation is pretty good on the wiki, and some of the walkthroughs are pretty good. But I just, for me, sometimes it doesn't click unless I see like a picture. There was no Webmin for it, so it was hard for me to get it installed and running. But no, I actually kind of like the idea of it, right? Conceptually, you've got a lot of small access points. You've got one that's a controller. I mean, it's the classic controller model, I guess. And then all those caps register with the controller, and you can make modifications individually or in mass to those access points. So it's actually pretty convenient. It was relatively easy to configure and install, and the way I do it is I have it so there's a network that the caps jump on so that they can reach the caps manager and get their configuration, and then they just push all the clients to a VLAN that gets trunked over to that cap, and Bob's your uncle. Makes it super simple. I actually enjoyed it. I'm not sure, so I played with Capsman when they first came out. It was kind of clunky back then, and they've really refined it a lot, so I don't know why I kept putting it off. It's because there was no need for me to, I suppose. I wasn't being forced into it until Nick wouldn't shut up, so I finally had to do it. But
I have no interest in it at all.
Yeah,
No?
at some point you'll get squeezed into it, and you'll be like, yeah, it's not so bad. It only took like 45 minutes, I think.
So here is my problem with Capsman. It really doesn't accomplish that much because it only manages the configuration of the wireless interfaces. And your access point is much more than just the configuration of your wireless interfaces. Just they're talking about VLANs, which means you have to set up a bridge, you have to set up VLANing, you have to set up a VLAN interface, which is the management interface. You probably want some, clock and routes and whatever else on those APs, which is not automated or configured massively from Capsman. So really, it doesn't accomplish much because you still need some way to change the rest of the configuration on all of those devices.
Yeah, I mean, your security policy, your default policies, it doesn't push anything else except for the wireless configuration.
And so, for me, that's like, why would I ever use it? Okay, obviously Unimus being my thing, but I can just set up Unimus and automate everything using Unimus. So why would I use Capsman? So there is one use case which is valid for Capsman for me. The only use case I ever have deployed or will deploy Capsman, unless things change in the future, is when you need remote forwarding. So that's the only feature that's super nice with Capsman, because you have the choice of local forwarding or remote forwarding, and you just tick a box for remote forwarding, and it takes care of building all of the tunnels, forwarding the traffic, and everything else. That is super nice.
So remote forwarding is where it tunnels all the traffic back to the controller, and it has to go through there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's literally, for me, that's the only use case I will ever use Capsman, because if I'm going to have 50 caps, I will want something that automates all of it, not just configuring wireless interfaces.
Yeah.
Because that's not all of it.
That was kind of the one part that, well, that was not one, just the one. There were several parts that kind of caught me up at first. I was trying to figure out how it configured like all the network portions, did a blah blah blah, and then I was like, oh, it actually doesn't do any of
it
that.
just doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like I said, for me, it just makes sense to put up Unimus and automate everything using that, and I'm done.
yeah, definitely. It's nice to have something like your orchestration platform, your automation platform that if you're going to use capsman, that will reach out to your cap and push all the rest of the stuff. Your basic firewalling, just the normal things you'd put on an access point to protect it from users and vice versa and all that stuff. Let's see what else. I saw Chad in the Slack, I think in the network channel, was talking about how he uses option 82, and I'm sure other people have done this. For whatever reason, it just fell out of my head. But so option 82 allows you to send back when somebody does a DHCP request additional information, and one of those additional things is remote agent ID. So he names his port a MAC address, like he makes up just a fictitious MAC address on a port, so whenever it gets passed back to sonar, it actually will authenticate everybody's device that's coming off that port, right? So that customer, all their devices, whenever they come as remote agent ID from that fictitious MAC address that gets authenticated. So it's a really nice way of not having to add every individual user's MAC address into sonar. You can just kind of make it up and stick it on the individual port. I thought that was pretty clever utilization.
Yet I've got something kind of set up. It's not going back to sonar yet because it's all going back to DHCPD, which sonar doesn't yet support and probably won't. But for my DSL infrastructure, I've got it set up to send chassis ID, slot ID, port ID. And then anytime, for management IPs, it doesn't matter what you plug in, it always gets the same IP on that port. And so then I always know on the management side which one I'm talking to. Because I can use private IPs, and so I can lay it out real nice and orderly. Public IPs are still kind of a mess, but at some point I should probably move that away from DHCPD because sonar doesn't support that. And when I get to the public IPs, it'd be nice to have that tied together.
For sure. All right, let's talk about some more hardware stuff, and then we'll switch back to kind of some more interesting topics, conversational topics, that is. So, Ubiquiti, we've got some Ubiquiti updates. I know sometimes I'm a little bit light on those, but today we've got 3, which is good. So, Ubiquiti Unifi Talk Controller. It's a Ubiquiti VoIP system. I'm not sure where they're at. I guess that's a beta thing right now, but there's a little bit of details on it. So, 1, it only installs on the Generation 2 Cloud Key hardware. Let's see, VoIP service is supplied by Twilio on the back end. Let's see, what else is it?
You can't change that.
Yeah, there is no option to change that.
No
You can't
third-party
choose,
SIP
you
providers.
can't... Yeah, nothing.
It's kind of odd.
It's super crazy. And also,
stupid.
it only supports the new Generation 2 IP phones that they have, the UVP Flex and UVP Touch phone models, it says, and I think those are based on Android. So that's interesting. They're putting out a phone system that only utilizes, I guess, they must have worked out some kind of deal with Twilio where they get a little taste of that every time they have a customer sign up or something. But I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to be able to just roll your own SIP provider in there.
It's like a completely artificial restriction based on corporate crap. That's all I can say about it. It doesn't make any sense for the user to limit that. It's not a technological limitation. It's just a stupid, ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I've never.
Yeah.
I mean, every VoIP platform nowadays has the ability to connect to a standard SIP provider. So this would have to be some kind of corporate lockout.
Well, there's another thing too.
Yeah,
I think Twilio has like programmable. Most of the features that PBX has, all through API. So I'm wondering if they're not running like a full PBX type software that handles everything. I think it's just like an API gateway to Twilio. So all of the conference type calls, the IVRs, it's all done on Twilio's end. And they're probably just taking phone registrations and then doing everything they possibly can through Twilio's API.
Interesting.
So instead of just like letting you register to a different trunk, they probably just leverage everything over the API. Because there's a bunch of providers now that do almost an entire PBX through an API endpoint. So I'm wondering if it's that type of thing.
It sounds I can't buzzword-ish. I get that's not really the real word, but new and fancy. So some Silicon Valley kid probably thought that was a real exciting thing to do and did it.
Yeah,
and
you can imagine some corporate manager coming up to their upper management of, we can have a VoIP PBX, it won't cost us anything, we'll just integrate it with third partners, and
Yeah, well,
and then of the two phones, the lower end phone, the Flex, will only talk to Unifi Talk, which then only talks to the Ubiquiti phone service, which is Twilio. The more expensive one will, the more expensive phone will talk to any, standards PBX, to do whatever you want. But then it's like, well, what's the point?
yeah. I was gonna say, even with
like-
that one, the third-party providers, like your 3CX or your just free PBX or whatever, they probably aren't gonna have good feature integration with the Unifi VoIP phones, just because they're just not as popular in the market. So it really sounds like if you were going to use them, you'd probably want to use them with the Unifi Talk Controller, which, to be perfectly honest, I think doing a easy button for VoIP services is something Ubiquiti should do. Right? To me, that sounds like that goes right in line with their Unifi platform. Right? The whole idea is that it's the easy button for enterprise stuff.
Yeah, on the Facebook groups, once this kind of came out, I just saw a whole bunch of stuff about how Ubiquiti just constantly craps on their channel, on their MSP customers, on anybody that is recommending Ubiquiti hardware for deployment, because Ubiquiti's always turning around and finding a way to cut them out of the chain. It's like, you used to only buy the hardware from distributors. Now you can buy it from Ubiquiti. You used to have to work with some local company to get this all set up. Now you can do it all with Ubiquiti, and so then that drives people to say, well, why would I keep buying Ubiquiti, platforms if they keep trying to find ways to cut me out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody likes the Unifi access points. I don't think anybody will argue that that's not a good platform. It's I think, to me, on their enterprise stuff, that's their flagship, right? Everything else should kind of snap in around that. VoIP services sounds good, and I think if it was good and solid, I could even recommend it to people, right? If it's affordable and works solidly. The only problem I have with that is that I'm just worried about longevity of support on that. Like, I don't know how long they're gonna keep maintaining
Front
the
row,
system.
MFi,
Right.
solar, air cams,
the building control system,
the
access control.
AC first generation hardware.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's more.
That's all that worries me, is just longevity of something like that. Because phones, people want to put a phone on their desk, and they want that phone to sit there for probably 8 to 10 years and just work, right? And work flawlessly. And if 3 years from now,
you want that,
support for the system stops, it's tricky.
And if you want a good long-term partner for this, you should talk to Pennytone.
There you go. Shout at Dave. Shout at Dave with your fist raised to the heavens.
I find really strange about Ubiquiti lately is that it seems like they've completely, well, I don't want to say completely, but they are spread really thin, right? Their focus has just about disappeared. They are now trying to do literally everything, like building access control systems, lights, camera necklaces, now phones.
Didn't they say that when they went public that they were going to make like a major product announcement every quarter or every 6 months or something like that?
Yeah, but
It's easy to make an announcement. It's
Yeah, exactly.
more difficult to make it useful and work.
Yeah. You know,
and keep it supported for any serious amount of time, which for products like building access control systems or lights or phones, you put those in, you want to use those for 10 years easily. And
yeah.
Ubiquiti, just with their track record and with how basically they're experimenting, right? They're completely experimenting, but if the experiment fails, you have a failed and abandoned product in your building, on your desk and everywhere.
Yeah.
I think someone should send Ubiquiti some Adderall or Ritalin.
I know I do a lot of access control 2 stuff, and I thought their access control system was an interesting first step. But again, like you said, it's something you want to put in, and at least on the hardware side, never touch it. You just want that stuff to run and run. You just want to administer it and make sure it stays secure, and continues to operate the way you think.
What if in 5 years you want to add additional door controls, or you want to change the system, and suddenly you can't purchase it anymore because it's end of life? And what do you do then? Do you rip out the entire system and replace it with something else?
Yeah, and I also wonder why, like with their access control, why didn't they just OEM from somebody like ZK Access? If you look at those guys, their platform's built off of the Tritium J stuff, which is kind of an industry staple, and that stuff is robust, it's tough. I mean, nuclear power plants use that control system for their automation of their systems. So, right, like it's a proven platform. So, and I know I can go and I can purchase that stuff for a pittance, so why not just OEM something that's really robust that is going to have industry support for now till forever? Why try and reinvent the wheel? Sometimes I don't understand that stuff.
That's not sexy, and they can't lock you in on that.
I don't know.
I mean,
if you get locked into the software part of it, they could probably do some kind of flash on the hardware that does kind of lock you in. You know what I mean? It's like there's ways around it that they could go, and I would feel much better.
But still, then it becomes a proprietary Ubiquiti system, which if it fails as a product, you won't be able to purchase it anymore in the upcoming years. You won't get support and updates. It's still the same.
Yeah.
Same debate, same issues.
Yeah. So speaking of that, Ubiquiti AirFiber60 got announced on the beta store. So that's a 60 gigahertz. I had to do a double take on the antenna because I thought somebody just did a Photoshop contest on the MikroTik. It looks just like the LHG60 with the different logo on the front, pretty much. Well, no, I guess the whole pattern in the dish looks a little bit different. This reminds me of the good old days where Ubiquiti used to sell the the Bullet, and then MikroTik came out with the Groove, which was the Bullet with kind of a swirly pattern on the outside. So now it's sincerest form of flattery here. The AirFiber60 looks just like the MikroTik LXG, only the AirFiber60 actually has a 5 gigahertz radio built in for failover, I guess. So if you run into kind of a ring fade or something.
It's a Ubiquiti tick.
Ubiquiti tick.
And so right away, there's no SFP port. They are, I believe they're using the same chipset as IgniteNet. And which means that it's bucking the AirFiber trend of AirFiber being built on FPGAs and custom silicon and being a superior protocol and product, whereas the AirMax and whatever other platforms have all been modified standards based. Well, this is just using a commodity chipset.
So do you think this is gonna tarnish the AirFiber name a little bit? Is that what you're afraid of?
I mean, it remains to be seen if it will ruin the name, but it used to be able to assume AirFiber will be a solid product.
Yeah.
Now you might, now you can't assume that because they're no longer doing it all in house.
And
it might, it might still be good, but you can no longer make the assumption that it's going to be good.
And not just that, AirFiber was also running a different operating system than the usual AirMax stuff. For example, with AirFiber, you had actually, it was probably the first time at that point where the original AirFibers came out. It was the first time Ubiquiti had decent wireless interface monitoring over SNMP. You could actually get signal strengths and like pretty much everything, which at that point in time on AirMax on Air OS you could not. So you could see it was actually quite a different operating system at the backend. Of course, it's still Linux, right? Like, I don't mean it's something proprietary, but you could see it was written differently, it was approached differently, it was priced very differently, obviously, but you could see it was even, I would dare to say it was targeted at a different customer segment, right? So Ubiquiti approached it in that way. At least that's how it felt to me, right? And what will this be at $299? Outside, copied from MikroTik. I know that's too harsh, but yeah. Inside, basically using commodity chipsets. Will this be crap again, or is this aimed at serious professional use cases? Is this for general commodity hardware? I don't know. I suppose we'll see.
Well, I mean, I think in a perfect world, it'll be a clone of the MikroTik LHG60, only with a very simplified, easy-to-use interface, right? I mean, I guess isn't that what Ubiquiti's known for, is the ease of use of their interface? So if it's a commodity chipset and they could put a simple interface on there, maybe that will be a success for them.
I just saw that the antenna gain on 5 gig is 11 dB. So that's going to pick up noise from everything.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's designed for good noise rejection or anything like that, right?
It doesn't surprise me.
Well, I mean, it's really the 5 gig is designed as an ultimate failover, right? So if your 60 gig works 99% of the time, you got to failover to the 5. I guess something's better than nothing, sort of thing. All right. So while we're talking about Ubiquiti, we've actually got another product. It's the Ubiquiti SunMax Solar stuff. They have.
Was that one great the first time?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is closer to what I had thought the solar stuff was to begin with. So they have the SunMax Solar Switch and Solar Point, 2 different devices that are basically clones of each other. One's for indoor installation, one's for outdoor installation. In essence, it's a little solar controller, so you can hook your panels into this and it'll charge the batteries. And it also has a built-in 4-port PoE switch, but it can also just spit out 24-volt DC. So it would be more. Well, let me back up a little bit. It's MSRP is $199, so it's not super expensive, I guess. But the DC output is only 40 watts max. So if you're doing it at 24-volt output, you're looking at like 1.6 amps or something at 24 volts. So that's not a whole lot of power. So you're not going to use this as like a remote side. What would you use this for? Like powering a couple of cameras and maybe a small CPE to shoot it back somewhere, something like that?
It possibly, or I suppose third world stuff, because it only has a 10100 switch.
Only 100 meg ports on it.
So possibly a small third world AirMax, deployment with a backhaul and an Omni or something, because there's only 4 ports, so you can't do 4 490-degree sectors.
Yeah, but you're only limited to 40 watts of output on this thing, so you don't get much power.
I mean, it's not that bad for just a couple of like a wireless retransmission point or something, right? Your standard normal AP or CPE or point-to-point link, it won't consume more than 10 watts, no chance. So you could easily connect theoretically up to 4, APs, CPs, point-to-point links, whatever you want. You could conceivably do that.
Yeah. So I guess you just use the 24-volt out to power your radios, and then the 100 meg ports for a camera or something local.
Just not any of the AirFiber products, because
Nope.
those use a lot more power.
Yeah, that's like more close to 50 watts just, or 100 watts just for the AirFiber.
All right. So that's the Ubiquiti train. Thomas, you put a link, or I think this was Thomas that put it in here, that Twitch hits 2.2 million total concurrent viewers during World of Warcraft Classic launch.
Yeah, it's. I was looking at it from a traffic perspective. That's like 10 terabytes a second of traffic just from Twitch, and basically it was the total. It was a new concurrent viewership record, 2.2 million, and 1.2 million out of that was for the World of Warcraft Classic launch. So it was like a complete hit out of nowhere. You know, you have this. Twitch is normally doing about 5 to 6 terabytes, right? And then from day to day, Twitch literally goes, I think it was from 5 terabytes to 13 terabytes.
Jesus.
That's like a huge traffic hit from day to day. Just, you know, because of an external game releases, you know, Blizzard pushes out WoW Classic, and then suddenly Twitch's network utilization literally doubles. We are not talking about small numbers. Like, that's doubling from 5 terabits to 13 terabits, and that's ridiculous.
It's bananas. That's crazy that their systems. Well, I guess Twitch was bought by Amazon a while back, right? So I'm assuming that, because I know as a avid Twitch watcher, not necessarily user, I guess, there was some transition pains when they were moving from the Twitch from their old infrastructure, I guess, to using more of the Amazon resources. So I guess, I mean, when you put it in that perspective, if they're really running off of Amazon's infrastructure, they should be able to handle this stuff, right?
But still, the biggest individual stream was at about 350,000 viewers, right? For those interested in gaming and games, there was a new world record for vanilla or WoW Classic raised to 60, and the winner of that, or the guy who is Joker D, who was pushing 60 and pushed it. I think the record was 3 days and 7 hours for 60. At his peak, I think it was somewhere around 350k individual viewers of a single channel. And I mean, think about the logistic of distributing a single video stream to 350,000 viewers like that.
Unicasting that to 300,000 people. That's bananas, man.
Twitch does appear to still be running under their own ASN.
Yeah, because I know you can still peer directly with Twitch.
Yeah.
If you hit an exchange with them or something like that. But
they're on 47 IXs, so that's pretty good.
But I'm pretty sure they're because there was some infrastructure changes where, so for anybody who watches a lot of Twitch, chat delay is a big thing for them.
Yeah.
So in the early days of, well, I mean, back in Justin TV days, it was pretty good, and then they started getting too much volume. And then when they went Twitch and really focused on gaming, they had to introduce this big delay because their server infrastructure just couldn't handle it, apparently, or whatever. The transcoding and doing all of the video stuff that they're doing and spitting all that stuff out. And then they started doing some beta stuff where a few streamers actually got lowered Twitch delay on the chat. And then when they switched to Amazon, I think it kind of took a hit for a little while again while they were switching infrastructure, but then they flipped a switch, and now chat delay is virtually non-existent these days on most of the streamers that I see. Like, it's, you type something in and they're responding within a few seconds. So it really does, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because that's what a lot of these people do. You're watching them for their personality, not necessarily for the game they're playing, right? You find them for the content, but you stay for the personality. And so ultimately lowering that chat delay just kind of cements that back and forth interaction that they're really trying to cultivate on Twitch. So it seems like they've really started taking advantage of what Amazon services have to offer as far as that goes, which only makes sense.
I just want to jump back for a second because there's a live email conversation on one of the mailing lists. The AirFiber60 antenna gain at 60 gigahertz is only 38 dB. Both the bigger MetroLink and MikroTik are 42. And so 4 dB doesn't sound like much, but at 60 gig, that's quite a bit.
Especially at distance, right? Because they're talking about 2 kilometers on these things.
So 2 kilometers using a 2 gigahertz byte channel.
All right, Thomas, are you ready to talk about the movie Brazil and why it's so terrible?
All right, let's do it.
So Thomas was selling me a pack of lies last cast right after. He was saying, "Man, I think I found my new favorite movie. It's the best thing ever."
Your favorite 80s movie?
Yeah, I don't remember anything about the 80s. I just remember you saying favorite movie that happened to have been made in the 80s. Saying about how it was like the Monty Python people that made it, and it's so funny. I tried watching this thing 3 separate occasions. I kept pushing forward. It was about all I could stomach. It's it seems like maybe it's a little bit more near and dear to your heart, because it seems like it's based on kind of a communistic society or something like that, and all the inefficiencies and things like that.
No, it's not about communism. Did you at least get to the Form 27B- or stroke 6 part?
Yeah, I think so. Where they got like receipts for the receipts, and like
No,
the
that
guy's
was
air
way
conditioning
earlier.
broke, and
Yeah, that the air
it had
conditioning
Dustin
scene,
Hoffman
yeah.
in there. Was the air conditioning repairman? This thing was.
Did you not like the air conditioning scene?
I didn't like
that. That was
any of it.
brilliant.
No, it wasn't. This was terrible. You're a terrible person. Why would you make me watch this, Thomas?
Okay, I think it's really. I think it's one of my favorite 80s movies, and I think it's just so 80s. You can see the influence of the other, or you can see the entire like style of the 80s when you look at movies like Clockwork Orange, 1894, the original Blade Runner, the original Mad Max. All of these movies are. They share those like 80s movies tropes and the style of it and the filming of it and camera work, and you can really see that in Brazil as well. And I just like the movie.
You're a lunatic. So
I really like the dystopian bureaucracy that's turned into a complete mess of bureaucratical everything, and I think it is quite funny, and it is done by the Monty Python people as well. So.
It's weird and depressing. That's how I would describe it.
I liked it. I really like it personally.
And so per Wikipedia, we have a budget of $15 million.
Oh. Well, some of the props were well done. I mean, I give them that.
I mean, compared to the budgets of the other movies in the era.
But they, at the box office, they only got 9.9. So it didn't even make 2/3 of its money back.
Wikipedia usually lists only US box office. If you want global box office, you have to go to Box Office Mojo.
Why would you know that?
Because I watch a lot of movies.
All right, so let's move from that to what you should be watching, which is the Great British Bake Off is back on. It's the 10th anniversary of the most charming show you will ever watch, and now they are so it comes out on Tuesday in the UK, and they're actually airing it on Fridays on Netflix in the States, so you too can watch it. They're doing a baker's dozen this year. You get 13 bakers. They're all amateur bakers. They get in there. They try and make things. They do good and bad. And they're so charmingly British. And you just love the people. You love the environment. But one of my favorite parts is this companion show called Extra Slice, where they have a bunch of comedians that make fun of the show. So how meta is that, dude? They've got a show about the show over there in the UK. That's how big this thing is. And it is brilliant all the way through. You guys need to do yourself a favor and get in there. Paul and Prue are great. I like Prue better than Mary Berry. Shots fired. I don't care. Come at me, bro. She was boring. She was a nice lady, but she was boring. Prue is far more interesting. So get on that hype train. Get on that Prue hype train. That's all I'm going to say about that. You boys into the Great British Bake Off? Because if you're not, you need to try it. Don't watch Brazil. Try Great British Bake Off.
See, this is why we don't agree. I could never ever watch any cooking show, baking shows, house renovation shows.
I didn't
Jesus
think I could watch
Christ, it's
it.
a total
I
waste
didn't
of
think I could
time.
watch it either, but it is so charming and infectious. You can't help yourself when you watch this show.
Do yourself a favor and just watch Brazil.
I would say, you know how sometimes you feel like having a good cry? It's like, I want to be depressed today. If you're in that mood, watch Brazil. Absolutely.
Oh,
if you're...
not at all.
Have yourself a good cry. Watch Brazil. If you want to feel
It's
uplifted...
like saying,
watch
you know,
Breaking.
oh, you want to be depressed? Watch the original Blade Runner. It's not depressing. It's a it's a piece of movie history.
So is The Room, but I wouldn't recommend everybody watch that either.
I think everybody needs to. Well, not everybody.
At least watch it.
obviously, but-
It's not for
But at
everybody.
least once you should. Yeah, it's definitely not for everybody, and not everybody will like it. But
Yeah.
I think at least once, if you are into movies, you should check it out. It's
Yeah, for
if you go into it with expectations, oh, they will be ruined. But if you go to it with zero expectations and just are there for the madness and
Yeah. The Room is
You
really
know.
good if you watch the Riff Tracks version. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but it's the guys who used to do Mystery Science Theater 3000. They do these kind of companion pieces for movies nowadays called Riff Tracks, so you can play it at the same time as the movie, and it's like watching MST 3K episode. And if you look hard enough, there's people who will take the Riff Tracks and just dub them on top of the movie, so you can watch it without having to actually, press play on your MP3 player at the same time or whatever. So that's pretty cool. That one's pretty fun.
I think there's a difference because usually, well, at least the Mystery Science Theater thing, they took really atrocious, horrible movies, right? And they just made complete fun of it. But The Room, you can actually watch The Room without it being too horrible. I mean, it's bad, but it's
It's bizarre.
it's so. Oh yeah, it's so bad. It's good, right?
So
territory.
strange.
So you can actually watch it by itself without, wanting to jump out of a window.
Yeah, my favorite scene is where Mark is on the roof and he's talking to Tommy Wiseau, and he's talking about some girl that was sleeping around with a bunch of guys, and he says, "Yeah, this one guy found out and beat her so bad she went to the hospital." And then Tommy immediately goes, "Ha ha 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 ha." He's like, "Oh my God, that was the funny part, Tommy. What's wrong with you?" It's like everything is wrong in that movie, and it's
So
pretty good.
you could watch The Room and you couldn't watch Brazil.
I don't know what's
Priorities.
wrong. I mean, there's a lot wrong with me, Thomas. That's all I'm gonna say. A lot wrong, not a lot right. All right, do you guys have any closing thoughts? Do you want to weigh in on the Prue versus Mary Berry controversy? I mean, I was just curious. Anybody have any last things before we stick a fork in it, because we're at an hour 17.
What I can think of, man.
All right. I hear my dogs going crazy in there. All right, let's take a fork in it. Nick, if people out on the internet wanted to get a hold of you, how would they go about that?
I should probably just go on the Little Brothers WISP Slack group if you want to tell them how to get there.
Yeah, patreon.com/TheBrothersWISP. Jump in there, and you can slide straight into this kid's DMs. Looking all goth
Awesome
today.
place.
Yeah. You guys can swap favorite nail polishes and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and emo bands. Is that where that's at?
Emo bands.
I don't
Sure.
know. What do the kids call it these days? Mikey, if people want to get a hold of you out on the internet, how do they do that?
Don't leave me alone. I'm busy.
Fair enough. I don't even want to talk to them.
Unless you're looking for a job, right?
Yes.
Never mind. I retract.
Only
call me if
then.
you want a job. All right. Thomas Kernak, how do people get a hold of you out on the internet?
Easy to find. Just Google for me and I'm on all the things you probably will search for me at. And of course there's always unimus.net. We have live chat, so that's the easiest way to find me.
Unimus.net. Jump over there. Give that kid a bunch of your money and be happy for it. You can find me at greg@gregsoul.com That's my email address, or you can just go to gregsoul.com, where I very occasionally blog on stuff. Also, you're going to be finding me soon on LinkedIn Learning. I've got a new course that's going to be coming out. I'm getting to do the new CCNA. Yay!
Awesome.
So I'm writing that in progress right now. It's always fun to visit an old friend. Oh, CCNA, how I've missed you. Also, questions, comments, contact us at TheBrothersWISP. Keep that stuff coming. We haven't done a 5 tips video in forever, so the you guys that have 5 tips you would give to anybody in whatever your industry happens to be. It doesn't always have to be necessarily technical. We've had kind of life advice on some of those, and I enjoy those thoroughly. So contact us there and let's do a 5 tips video. Share your knowledge. Get back to the community. Patreon.com/TheBrothersWISP, Facebook.com/TheBrothersWISP, TheBrothersWISP.com. Thank you guys for listening. For all of you that made it all.
Also, the Brothers Wisp on Twitter.
There you go. For those that still swim through that cesspool that is Twitter, you can find us there as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mike, Nick, Thomas. Bye, guys.
Start learning.
See ya.
So people can start searching, shooting up the web in neighborhoods, net surfing. We got horrible jokes, we're loud and annoying, but we're informative facts, we're not disappointing. Just give us a listen, cause fun is the mission. I'm telling you, you don't know what you are missing. Ideas and some good comedy given. If you missed the show already, don't worry, you're forgiven.